We're back on Born Before 64 with Barbara Everett Heintz, and I'm sorry I didn't say that in the very beginning.
Okay.
The author of Pink Honeysuckle. And we were talking about your early life in Southern Appalachia. And your father moved from Alabama to Tennessee.
Right.
And how old were you? You were 3 years old at the time. So were you a middle child, or were you at the end, or where were you in the scheme of things?
I was a middle child. There were two older brothers,
Right.
two sisters together, and then I was born. The next child that would be born was very disabled. So I was sort of in there by myself. And then some years later, two more children would be born alive and well.
Right. Your mom didn't have an easy life, do you think?
I think this is a point where I would like to take it definitely to my mother's struggle, but to talk about the book from the standpoint that I use our story to make this a story of many Appalachian families.
Right.
My mother, especially since her mother had decided that she was having too many children and she would be the outcast
Of the family?
of the family, yes.
Wow.
She would wind up doing everything alone, whereas her brothers and sisters with other farms in the area would be helping each other out.
Because your mom had so many children, she felt, did the other children have just 2 or 3 kids? Is that what it was?
We cannot tell you why, but for some reason, most of the members of her family either would have 1 child, 2 children, or none. So we were considered the bunch.
This sounds very familiar to me. I'll tell you the reason why. It was similar in my family. My uncles and my aunt only had 1 or 2 children, or 3 children, and we had the most. So we were kind of the black sheep of the family because we had so many kids.
Right.
That, and my grandmother, she did help us in the end, but it seems, I can imagine her struggle with, having that many children, having her mother feel that way, and then having a child that was disabled as well.
All of that, plus what happened when suddenly the farm acreage was taken away, the Pay Not to Plant program, which left most farmers, like my father, broke and with the choice to go north by themselves, get a job in the factories,
Right.
or to move entire families north.
Right.
And I want to make this sound as big as it is because we recently saw a documentary on PBS about the Oklahomans. And I would say the number of people affected along the Southern Appalachian Trail with the loss of farm acreage probably far outnumbered the number of Oklahomans that went to California. And theirs was a matter of land misuse, sadly. They didn't know it, but it was. For us, though, the government decided they needed strong backs north. So Southern Appalachian people, it's just our culture. We did what we were told to do. And so for 6 years, my mother would be alone with all of us as children.
All of you.
All of us, except during that time, during the first year of our living in Tennessee, her eldest son, who was so beloved to her, would leave. he went into the Navy. And then at 15, it sounds as if this would not be feasible in mid-20th century America, but at age 15, my brother Robert, who wrote the prologue to my book,
it was beautiful,
would also go. And thank you for saying his work is beautiful, because he brings the men into this. A 15-year-old boy that was trying to run an 88-acre farm
by himself, basically.
By himself with all of us, and Mom keeping him out of school.
Wow.
So finally, after a couple of years, he just told Dad, I can't do it anymore. And he got in, they would go in cars, 6 and 7 together,
Wow.
Back and forth, just to get a visit home, those who kept families at home.
Now let me ask this question. If he was gone, who then took over the farm situation?
That was when all of us as little girls came in.
How old were you at the time?
I was 4 years younger than my next sister, so I was probably about 6 when Dad first left. So by the time my brother left, I might have been 8 years old. I really don't remember exactly the date, but that Mom would then she would look to us to literally do everything from bring in firewood, take care of the few cattle that we had.
Were you still growing cotton at all?
Dad was coming home when he could. He would get a week in the spring, maybe a week in the fall, maybe a few days around Christmas. So any visit home was devoted to trying to keep a farm. And again, this was many families. We're talking North Georgia, North Alabama, Middle Tennessee, parts of the Carolinas, especially North Carolina.
What did you, if you weren't growing cotton, what were you actually producing, if anything?
Well, we were satisfied as a family and as a people to live as people had 100 years before.
And let's talk about that a little bit, because that really is important to the story. There was a lot of things that there were hardships for you growing up as a child. You didn't have a lot. That's start. Did you guys go hungry at all?
We definitely had periods of time when we would be hungry. I remember particularly one night, I was just 11 or 12 at the time, but my father had come home for a visit. We were standing around the stove, and my mother came to him and said, Amos, which was my father's name, we have nothing in this house for these kids to eat anymore.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break, and we're going to be right back with Barbara Everett Heintz and Pink Honeysuckle.